This
Thanks everyone
conference
for
will now be
joining
recorded.
today. Sorry, I was meant to give a couple of seconds. Yes, thanks ever so much for that introduction, Paul, and for inviting me to give this presentation at lunchtime. It's really great to have this opportunity. So I'll just crack on if that's all right. So just today we're going to cover CIRAS and what we do, but with a focus on your workforce being the eyes and ears of your safety management system. And I've put a question in there, are you listening? And we'll go on to that a little bit more later. So just in terms of what I'm going to cover today, Paul's given me a great introduction, so I won't dwell on that. We're going to have a look at CIRAS and what CIRAS is and how does it work, because I appreciate that there'll be some people listening today that are really familiar with CIRAS, but others that maybe never even heard of us. So hopefully everyone will be able to take something new away from that section today. For those of you who already know about us, it will be a little bit of a refresh. Then we're going to do CIRAS in numbers. I'll leave that as a bit cryptic and you can wait for that section. And then, so that question, are you really listening to your front line? And we'll have a look at that at the end of the presentation. So what is CIRAS and how does it work? So CIRAS is a confidential reporting service for health, safety and wellbeing concerns. And I've put our ambition here on this slide. And our ambition is to improve the health, safety and wellbeing of staff and passengers across the transport sector. And we do this in two ways: by enabling people to speak up about their concerns, by giving them a channel to do that, and by helping them resolve those concerns, we're able to share that learning and intelligence and share that amongst the CIRAS community. So it's kind of twofold. So CIRAS is a way of offering staff a way of speaking up in complete confidence. And we're completely independent of our members. I'll cover off what our membership looks like in a little while, but we are, despite having that many members, we work alongside them to improve their safety systems, but we're completely independent. And that last point is probably the most important one. We provide that safety net so staff can always be heard. Now, our history was very much in heavy rail. We started off 25 years ago. In fact, last year was our 25th birthday anniversary. And it was very much used to be just heavy rail. But over the years, we've really grown our membership. And now we cover not just heavy rail, but the Network Rail and TfL supply chains. We cover light rail and metro, and obviously the buses now. And in terms of, you can see that construction vehicle, lots of our rail members have construction companies in their supply chain, and therefore we cover off those companies as well. So it's a really, really diverse membership. And actually that's what part of our part of what we've got to offer. We offer that community of health and safety professionals where we can all learn from each other, sharing good practice and responding to these reports that we get. Now, when I'm out and about with my members, and also I've got a team of stakeholder managers that go out and about and talk to members, we often hear a lot of misperceptions about CIRAS, and I thought I'd just clear up a few of those now, because now is a good time. So what we are is 100% confidential. So people who come and raise a concern with us can be 100% assured that their confidentiality will not be compromised. We are your partner, so we work with our members and we are complementary to their internal channels. And I've got over on the right-hand side what we're not. We're definitely not a replacement for internal channels. And I really want to stress that, because I think some people can be a little bit reticent about CIRAS being used in their organisations because they think we're going to try and encourage people to report to us and not them. That isn't the case at all. We, as I said earlier, are that safety net safety net, picking up issues that might otherwise go unreported, not a replacement for internal reporting channels. What we are is an enabler working alongside the reporter, and that's the person who comes to us with the concern, and the company. What we're not is a whistleblower, and there is a distinct difference between confidential reporting and whistleblowing, because whistleblowing often focuses on wrongdoing, and often in whistleblowing cases, the identity of a reporter or the person who's raised the concern will come out in the end. Whereas with CIRAS, it's a really, it's a kind of 360 experience in that the reporter comes to us, raises the concern, we facilitate the relationship to getting that concern raised with the member comes back to us, and then we feed back to the reporter. So you can very much get a kind of closed loop, and no one outside of that loop needs to know who that person is. And in fact, the only people who know who the reporter is the analyst that takes the report in the first place. We're very easy to use, and I'll demonstrate in a minute how easy it is to use CIRAS. And we're a facilitator for sharing good practice. If we are able to help resolve a concern, then we publish that report and others can learn from what organisations have done to tackle that issue. Therefore, all of these things we do present opportunity to improve safety. Just going to the other side of the slide, I've said we're not an investigator or a regulator. CIRAS doesn't investigate any of the concerns, and we don't take the role of the regulator at all. We're not a channel for grievances or HR issues, and if we get them, we're not able to take those forward. And we're definitely not a threat to any of our member organisations. I stressed earlier that people can think we're sometimes trying to get people to report to us as opposed to them. That's not the case at all. We definitely want to work alongside our members. So hopefully you'll all be familiar with this triangle. I think it's called Bird's Triangle in some form or another. And I just really wanted to use this to demonstrate where CIRAS fits in the kind of reporting chain of events, where confidential reporting fits in. So obviously the things at the top of the triangle are kind of major accidents or incidents that have happened. Then the second layer are those near misses and close calls. They nearly result in a safety incident. And then at the bottom, and this is where confidential reporting fits in, you've got things like unsafe conditions or acts. And these, if they're left unchecked, can lead to a safety incident. And these are the kind of issues that get reported to CIRAS, and we help resolve them. And by doing so, potentially prevent things turning into a safety incident or moving further up the triangle. So this slide here shows why people might come to CIRAS in the first place, why they might not report something internally. And these are just a few of the things we hear. There are lots and lots of reasons. So if you can take a look as we go through them, I might get into trouble. I'm sorry, I'm just going to move my screen thing. I don't want to upset anyone. I don't want to look stupid. I've had a bad experience before, and that's a really interesting one, because even if people move to a new organisation, if they've had a previous experience, that might actually present problems with, even if a new company has got a really open culture, they might still feel that bad experience and not trust in the new system and be kind of scarred by that. And then I don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. So these are just a few of the reasons why people might come to us and not report internally. There was an interesting story, and we hear it quite often, that, and I've just described it a little bit before, in that often we go out to our member organisations and we meet some really, really lovely people, really nice managers, very open, have open door policies, anyone can come and talk to me. and they are mortified if they get a CIRAS report because they think we've done so much to make our organisation, you know, open to hearing things, and people still feel they have to report confidentially. But as I said before, it's not just what people are experiencing in their current work environment. It can be bad experiences before, and it takes a long time to unpack that and gain that trust back. So what can you report to CIRAS? Now, here on the screen are a few of the icons showing the main topic areas we hear concerns about, and you'll probably be very familiar with a lot of them. Things like welfare facilities, equipment, rules and procedures, safety processes, and then very familiar ones like fatigue, and that's often linked with things like shift design, training and competence, and working environment. These are all the kinds of topic areas we will receive reports on. The three at the bottom, occupational hygiene, environment, and asset integrity, are fairly new icons we're using because we're more and more hearing concerns in these kind of areas. Things like cyber security, where you might think that's a very strange thing someone might report to CIRAS, but if there's something you're worried about your system safety being compromised, and that could have an impact on safety, health, or well-being, we can hear concerns about that. And the environment as well, things like noise, fly tipping, waste disposal, air quality. These are things that are coming up. We're seeing come up more and more within a CIRAS report. So we expect those three at the bottom to become more common as we go forward. What we say to people is that we're here any genuine health, safety and wellbeing concern. So we're open to hearing from anyone that's got a concern around those areas. So how does CIRAS reporting work? Now, here kind of the arrow shows the journey that our reporters will go on. So first of all, the reporter raises a concern with us. They talk and we listen. And that's really important because actually the listening part of it is often quite, well, it is a significantly important part of the process because often people haven't been heard. So having the opportunity to speak to someone about their concern is a really important part of the process. What we then need to do is evaluate that concern and work out if we can take it forward as a confidential report. And as part of that, we need to assess the confidentiality. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, about how we do that. But the most important thing is we need to make sure that it can be processed without the identity of that reporter being known. Confidentiality is CIRAS's USP, and if we broke that, we would no longer be CIRAS. So that is absolutely critical. What I will say here is that if we are unable to take it forward as a confidential concern, we would always redirect the reporter to an alternative channel. We would never say, oh, I'm sorry, we can't help you, goodbye. We would always make sure they had at least a contact number or an idea of where they should take their concern to next if we're unable to help them. And we call that a redirection. If we are able to take the report forward, one of our analysts will write up that report and pose and frame it as some questions to ask the company. That report is then sent to the company, and the company will get a period of time in which to provide a response. We then share that response back to the reporter and get their feedback. If they're satisfied with the outcome, then we can close the case. If, for example, they're not satisfied and they have more questions, then we will facilitate going back to the company until the issue is resolved to the reporter's satisfaction. I'd also like to flag here that reporters can raise concerns not just about their own company, but other companies as well. So for example, if someone's out on a work site working on a project and there are other contractors there and they see something that isn't quite right, they might think, oh, I can't report that to my company. Who can I report it to? They might not want to go directly to the other company because it might cause issues between the companies. They could have contractual worries that they might not get given contracts in the future. So this is where they can flag their concerns with us. So what we call that is third-party reporting. So how do we protect the confidentiality of our reporters? When someone comes to us, we make lots of different checks. And our reporting analysts, we've got 3 reporting analysts at the moment. They're highly trained. They've got interview technique training, and they've got often got degrees in psychology. So they're really, really skilled for this job. What they do is they check, has it been reported already? These are some of the things they look at. How many people does it affect? Where's the location? Is it site specific? So all these things allow them to gauge, how many other people might know about this. We will leave out any information which could identify the reporter. And this sometimes means we have to make the report kind of apply more widely. So whereas we might not talk about an individual train unit, we might talk about a certain model that could be used in several different on several different locations. But if we need to, we have to expand the kind of area or the pool of people that it could apply to, just to protect that person's confidentiality. And how we work is really important as well. We've got secure IT systems and processes. The reporter's identity is only known to the analyst. I mentioned earlier that there were 3 reporting analysts. They are the only people that will ever know who's raised that concern. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have a clue because I'm not part of the reporting team. Despite that, everyone that works for CIRAS has signed a confidentiality agreement. So we are confident that we can protect that person's identity. If you'd like to know a little bit more about how we protect confidentiality, we've got a section on that under the Raise a Concern area of our website. So the address is on the bottom of that slide. And I think these slides are going to be shared afterwards, so you'll have that as a reference point. So for the next part of my presentation, I'm going to have a look at CIRAS in numbers. So I mentioned earlier, one of the interesting numbers this year is that we've been around for 25 years. It was our birthday last September, and over time we've evolved. In terms of CIRAS in numbers and talking about reports, we receive between 200 and 250 reports every year. Last year, as you can imagine, was a bit different. We definitely didn't get as many reports. As you can see, we got 165 last year, but I think that was owing to the pandemic. And it's interesting, and I'll talk about it a little bit later on when I look at some of the safety culture information. I think last year, companies' internal channels really kind of I don't know, got better because we definitely received less reports, and I think companies, our members that have reported back to us, definitely say they received more reports. So I think that's why we're receiving less last year, sorry. If you look at the top line, the total contacts, that shows how many people have come to us with concerns or come to us with an issue. The difference is the people we've had to redirect. And although the actual amount of reports we take is a proportion of that, which is a lower than the total amount, every time we have the opportunity to speak to a member of staff that comes to us with a concern, we feel like we're helping them get to the right place. So the top line is as important as the number of reports we're actually able to take forward. If we have a look now at reporting themes, these kind of show the areas that we hear that most of our reports get categorised into. So over the last 3 years, these have been the top 5 themes. So you probably won't be surprised at these infrastructure issues, a person's environment, equipment, rules and procedures, and health and well-being. And interestingly, you'll see the last health and well-being from last year, that really shot up to 40% of our reports, which is unsurprising given that we received lots of information, lots of issues and concerns relating to COVID. This pie chart here shows how many people would have raised a concern internally first. So 50% of our reporters that came to us last year raised a concern internally first, and 41% came directly to us. Now, if I break that down a little bit further, so out of the 56% that had raised a concern internally first, these are the reasons given to why they've then come to CIRAS. So 77% said internal channels did not provide a satisfactory outcome, and 23% said internal channels timescales for resolution were too long. So that gives you an idea of why people have then come to us. If we then look at how many people came straight to CIRAS, i.e. didn't report internally first, this is interesting as well. So out of that proportion of people, 48% came to us first because it was that third party reporting. You remember I described earlier how people can report about a company other than the one they work for. 27% came to us and they cited fear, and 25% came to us because of their perception of their internal channels. Now that could be because they've used the internal channels before and haven't had any luck, or because other people have said, oh, there's no point in reporting, things don't get resolved. There's lots of different reasons behind that one. So that just goes to show a little bit more of a breakdown. For the next part of my presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit more about safety culture. Now, when reporters come to us, they often cite safety culture as a key contributor to their safety concern. And CIRAS likes to improve safety culture by firstly providing that safety net to capture those concerns that might otherwise go unreported. Secondly, because we try and facilitate the resolution of those concerns. And thirdly, by sharing the intelligence and encouraging continuous improvement as a result of that resolution of that concern. So we hope that we can work with our members to improve their safety culture. In addition to that, safety culture data is gathered from our reporters when they're going through the interview to hear about their concern. This slide, I appreciate, is very busy and we'll break it down over the next few slides. But when reporters come to us, they get asked 9 safety culture related statements where they have to say yes or no as a response. If we take 4 of them, the top 4, I'm clear on what safety issues can be reported. I always report a near miss or close call. I would be confident to report an unsafe act, or I feel comfortable approaching a colleague if their behaviour is unsafe. You can see that these actually score quite positively. Our reporters say, yes, that statement is true. It's over 80% for the majority of those, which is brilliant. That's really encouraging. The next 2 statements, safety reporting is encouraged by my company and my company gives me regular safety briefings. Still over 60%, but there is room for improvement with this. And then the final 3 statements, managers acknowledge staff who report safety issues, my company promotes the value of confidential reporting, and if I raise a health and safety issues, it's taken seriously by managers. You'll see here that these are the lower end of the scale. And actually that bottom one, if I raise this health and safety issues, it's taken seriously, scores quite low, and there's definitely room for improvement there. Now we do get challenged a bit about our safety culture questions because and validly people say, if people are coming to you and you ask them these questions, the fact that they're coming to you in the first place means they're maybe dissatisfied with their own channels and the way their concerns being dealt with, which could be true. But in fact, we asked the same set of questions to a much wider pool of of people within the CIRAS community a few years ago, and we got over 1,000 responses back to that particular survey, and the pattern almost mirrored what we were receiving from our reporters. And when we actually looked at it further and looked at the breakdown between frontline staff and management, you can definitely see there's a gap in how people responded to those questions. And I think that's really interesting. The reality on the front line can be very different from the reality experienced by managers. So just to finish off the safety culture section, I just wanted to show you this slide, which shows the bit of the relationship between reporting culture, learning culture, and safety culture. We believe that actually, well, the one thing, CIRAS, we always say when we go out and about to our members is it doesn't matter where you report, just make sure you report it. And if you think about all the intelligence you get from your reporting, whether it be internal channels, confidential, the other various ways via the unions, that gives a lot of intelligence that you can learn from. And by learning things, you improve what you do, and that improves the safety culture. So the final part of my presentation, I'm just going to cover off this question that I started, that I highlighted at the beginning. Are you listening inclusively? So we all know what it feels like, hopefully, when you've been working as part of a team, when you're all on the same page, you're all fired up, you've all got a shared goal, and that can be a really good feeling when you're striving for the same thing. But it's not always like that. I wonder if you can reflect if you've ever been in a team where you felt a bit of an outsider, where everyone else seems to have been on the same page, but in fact you felt like you're not really included. Maybe it's a situation where you don't feel you've been able to speak because there's too many dominating voices, or banter that could border on offensive. It's really hard to deliver your best in those kind of situations, and it's very easy to let the majority view win, even if it didn't seem to be the best solution. And I think that's one thing when you're working, for example, in an office, or even when you're arranging a school event or a community event. But out in a safety critical environment, this can have serious consequences. At CIRAS, we believe that people are critical or a critical part of any health and safety system, and that's all people. Not only as the eyes and ears to know what is actually happening out there on the front line, for example, on a late shift on a cold, wet, windy night, but also as sensitive monitors of invisible cultural factors, which we all too often read about in accident reports, and that's when it's too late. This slide highlights an example of an RAIB report which investigated an incident where two road rail mobile lifting platforms collided on an engineering work site. You can read the statement on the slide about what was stated as part of the findings. In addition to that, it says in the report, cultural factors on the site led to poor working relationships between machine operators and controllers, and an excessive focus on getting the job done rather than compliance with rules and operating standards. Assurance processes had not identified these issues. That's not to say that many organisations have made great progress in creating listening cultures where everyone is encouraged to speak up openly about safety, but it's not necessarily working for everyone. Can you say to yourself, do you listen for the safety silences to identify where there might be gaps in what you hear about, because some viewpoints are not voiced or not heard. These voices, which we're less likely to hear, are also the ones that can be valuable because they might offer a different perspective. If we want to make our listening truly inclusive, we need to acknowledge that everybody's different. And that's where having a broad range of routes for people to raise concerns and ideas can help. For 25 years, CIRAS has worked across the transport sector to enable workers to speak up with any concern or ideas that could impact health, well-being or safety. And workers can raise concerns about non-inclusive cultures and their impact on safety and well-being through CIRAS. Whilst acts of individual discrimination would have to be dealt with through other channels, we can handle concerns about systemic issues, such as highlighting that internal reporting channels are not effective for inclusion-related concerns. An example of that is if people are not speaking up because they fear repercussions from reporting harassment, or because their experience is that reporting internally doesn't lead to any action, or if there's a pattern of discriminatory behaviour existing in workplaces and multiple people are involved and affected. And by guaranteeing to protect someone's confidentiality and taking the time to listen to what they have to say, we can enable leaders to hear those voices that might otherwise be unheard. So just before I finish, I just thought I'd plug our CIRAS website. So hopefully people that are listening will be members of our, will be part of our members' organisations as well. So you will have the opportunity to visit our website and get member-only access. What you need to do is register, and if we identify your email handle as one of our members, that automatically gives you access to if you register at the top, in the top right hand corner, it will automatically give you access to the My CIRAS area, where you can see reports, you can see articles, blogs, and access to a whole load of resources and learning that might benefit your organisation. There's case studies. So if you've got an issue that you think, oh, I wonder how other people have dealt with it, we might have had a report on that or a concern raised about that, and you can read about how someone else has tackled that particular issue. Okay, I think that's everything from me. So we're going to open it up to questions, I believe. But if you have a question that you prefer to take with offline with me, I've put my email address on there as well. So please do feel free to drop me an email as well. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Kerry. Interesting and fascinating in particular, the sort of expanding beyond the sort of health, safety aspects, welfare, to this inclusivity and management of diversity, which I think is very important for us all. And of course, it's a key factor that's considered in your professional journey that we need to consider. So we don't actually have any questions. I would welcome some questions from anyone, if there's anyone wants to ask one in person. Otherwise, I've got a couple I could start with. While people perhaps think of a question, thanks for that, Kerry. Because noting now that you've gone beyond heavy rail and you're now into sort of other areas, bus and tram, you've included. Referred to as well there, which is interesting. So what's the sort of proportion comparison between the heavy rail and say the bus and light rail areas that you cover? Can you give us an indication on that, please?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, predominantly we still get the majority of our reports from the infrastructure managers and the TOCs, so the train operators. That definitely takes up, I would say, I think it's about 60%, and the rest of it is made up. Our bus reports are, they joined back in 2015, and we've slowly been building the number of reports we receive from our bus community up, but it's still predominantly the heavy rail, because I think we've got such a big history with them. CIRAS has been part of their organisations for so long, and it does take a long time to kind of embed what we do and get people using the service.
Okay, thanks. I'll have a question from Nick Ramsden. Nick, would you like to ask it yourself? Would you like to unmute yourself and ask it yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Sorry, just finishing my lunch. Thanks for the presentation, though, Kerry. In design consultancies, when we spot any risks or hazards or anything that we deem to be a potential safety problem, we log them as design close calls. And if we don't get them ironed out, then they carry on through the feasibility outline and detailed design until they're captured as part of the AFC. I just wondered if many design close calls get logged with yourselves, CIRAS, or do they mainly stay as internal in your experience?
I'm just trying to recall any that I've heard of. We certainly don't get lots and lots. I think in this kind of area where we've ever had reports, if people are working on projects, so kind of office-based staff working in projects, and they're being told to cut corners to reduce costs and things like that, we might get those types of reports. But I'm not sure whether I've ever heard of any kind of specifically design based reports.
Okay, some can be sort of financial corner cutting.
Right, okay, that kind of thing, yes. It's not often, and I think that's mainly because people don't realise they can report that kind of thing to us. And so it's probably people don't realise rather than they don't, that they don't exist. Well, they obviously do and report it through close call.
Well, thanks for that.
Yeah,
thanks for that, Nick.
No, thanks for the response, Kerry. Thanks, Paul.
Interesting point, though, Nick, I think you make that in terms of a touch on something perhaps controversial, careful what to say. I don't want to get a ban from the industry, but I mean, we're facing a sort of perhaps the word on the street is the cuts, and sort of we need to pare back because of the sort of investment constraints on the industry. TfL, Network Rail, or Great British Railways going to be facing sort of delivering efficient railway. I mean, I think it just emphasises the importance that you need to be part of the scene, and hopefully, just comment perhaps from you, Kerry, on that you're going to be very much in the picture and resourced accordingly, because I can see some issues ahead.
Absolutely, and I think we're talking as an organisation right this very minute about how we can support the industry through times of change, and we very much see ourselves as being able to play a part in that, because if people are concerned about the security of their jobs, or even that the focus is shifted to other priorities, cost cutting, system changes and things, and it just takes the edge off the focus on safety, people need to be able to feel that they can report things. So we do absolutely see ourselves playing a part in that.
Excellent, and I think it's right. It's important for the PWI to be supporting your role and promoting, encouraging the sort of reporting safety matters, and as you say, the inclusivity matters, which was very important and great to see you refer to. So I've got another question from Paul Meads. Paul, would you like to ask it yourself?
Yep, certainly. Thank you, Paul. Kerry, thank you for a really interesting overview. I was just curious whether any measures are used, or what measures are used to help understand the positive change that CIRAS has helped deliver.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, actually. Sorry, was it Paul? I couldn't see your name come up.
That's right, yeah, Paul, yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose we don't have any specific KPIs that we report back on, apart from internally to kind of measure how many reports we're dealing with and things like that. But we do collect feedback from each of our reporters, and we monitor that to make sure that people are finding the service valuable. And then in sharing the good practice from the reports, we run events and obviously share it in our newsletters, and so we're able to kind of distribute the learnings and that way. But in terms of measures, that's one I might have to go away and have a think about, if that's okay.
No, not at all. Not at all. I recognise because there was an area of detachment, it might be, well, obviously needs to be an area of detachment. It might not be so straightforward to have those measures. So I was just curious if there was anything apparent, but it wasn't intended to put you on the spot at all. I was just interested.
No, and it's not. It's one we've been trying to tackle actually, because often when we're doing our business development, companies will say, so what's in it? What's the money saving for us? And it's really hard to put a monetary value on preventing something from happening, because we can't say what we're preventing from happening. So it's something we've been wrestling with. So it is definitely on our radar, but nothing to report back at the moment.
No, thank you anyway.
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. And I've just got one closing sort of, I think, question from me then, Kerry. I don't think there's any other questions emerging, but it's about how you work with other bodies in terms of the data and information practice, in particular RSSB, or maybe RAIB. Do you, in terms of the data sources and underlying statistics or whatever you use?
Yeah, absolutely. We do work with both RSSB and RAIB. As you saw from my slides, the actual amount of reports we receive every year is quite small. So we often contribute to be part of the jigsaw, part of the picture. We're involved in quite a few of the RSSB safety-based groups, providing our input on what we've heard. For example, we provide data to the trespass risk group and the road rail risk group. I think it's called something else, sorry, but it looks at the road rail risk. So we contribute our data, albeit a small proportion of that, and our findings to those groups. And if, for example, the RAIB are investigating a report, sometimes they'll come to us and say, have you had any reports on this particular topic area? Where we can, we will share information about what we've looked into and what we've heard, always making sure that no confidentiality is, that we maintain that. Okay, well, thanks very much, Kerry. Thanks from Shoaib Mahmood there, thank you very much. I'll wrap up the session. Thanks for your time, Kerry. What I've always found fascinating insights to the activities at CIRAS, and for me, and why I'm quite passionate about everyone sees this, it's so important that everyone can see that there truly is this independent route to raise issues. And the focus you've given us today as well about inclusivity, I think, for again another insight to me how important it is for us going on. And all these, as I emphasise again, are aspects of being a professional engineer and assessed under the Engineering Council measures. So great supporting stuff. And I think what I picked out from what you said is how you hear those voices which might otherwise be unheard. And I think that was quite poignant in the statement today, and for us as managers and operatives or in the industry to take away and know that you can report matters and be heard confidentially. So I'd like everybody remaining to unmute, and we'd like you to give Kerry some applause. Thanks. Thank you.
If anyone else would like to unmute, please. And we...
It feels like I'm in the room.
Thank you very much. I will linger for anyone who wants to have a quick chat about anything to do with the PWI. And Kerry, are you going to just be there for another 5 minutes or so if someone wants to?
Yeah, happy to hold on in case anyone has any questions.
Yeah,